So now that we have wrapped up our bleachers, we can say that all of the digital assets required for the talented ball are finished. Well, we'd at least like to think they're finished. In the real world, a technical director will wrap up a tool, a digital asset, or whatever it may be, hand it off to an artist for the artist to then use in a production. Often, the artist will find that the tool or asset may be missing particular control over what the tool or asset does. So in this case, before we bring Volume 1 to a close, Steve's going to go ahead and lay everything out so that it represents what we saw in our storyboards at the very beginning of this volume. Now keep in mind, it's in Volume 2 where we're going to be setting up our cameras, our lighting, writing any sort of render scripts that might help make rendering easier, as well as all of the final compositing. But instead of having all of the setup done in that video, we thought it would be nice to go ahead and address scene setup, meaning getting all of our props, our character, etc., placed where they need to be placed, such that while we're on our way to getting everything in place, if anything just doesn't cooperate, basically, if we don't have the control we need over a particular asset, we can go ahead and address that and add that control in this volume. Again, that is something that's very common to a technical director. Often they're going to have the artist coming back to them saying, hey, your asset was fantastic, but it would be real nice if I could do this. And how would you go about going in and changing that? So let's go ahead and get things set up in this video and talk about what sort of control might be missing.
Cool, so I took some time off of camera to go ahead and lay this out as close as possible to what I sort of envisioned for the final animation. And what I've done is I've gone and written down a whole load of parameters, and I'm now going to go through and set those parameters so you can kind of see the direction that I've taken with the layout. But feel free to use different parameters if you so wish. It may have effects on your animation and your lighting, but feel free to set this up however you want to set it up. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to deal with the stage. So let's jump up to object level, and I'm going to hunt down our stage asset. Let's bring up our stage and jump inside by double clicking. Our platform size I want set to 50 by 1 by 30, so that it's longer rather than wide. And I'm going to decrease the support radius to around 2.5. Everything else on our stage I'm going to leave as default. So with this setup, we can now start positioning our pool and our ladder and getting their sizes relative to the stage. So I'm going to jump up, and next let's deal with the pool. So I'm going to hide out our bleachers because it makes no sense for them to be there. And let's bring our pool in, jump inside, and make sure that we can show all objects so we can see how the pool corresponds to our stage. Let's jump over to the geometry tab. I'm going to set the height to 3.59. I'm going to set the inner depth, which if you recall is this dimension from the inside, how far from the top. I'm going to increase that slightly to 2.34. I'm going to set the outer radius to 4.97 and the inner radius to 4.24, which you'll see will give us a much thinner rim around our pool, and the pool's kind of about a third of the width of the stage, which is the look I was going for. So with that in place, we can now jump up to object level and use the object level transforms to move this pool to the performance end of the stage. So to do that, I'm going to take translate X and I'm going to set it to negative 18.7023, and that will position the pool right up on this end of the stage. I'm now going to bring in our ladder, which currently is sort of sitting halfway in the center, and it's kind of short. So let's first deal with increasing the height. So I'm going to increase the height of the ladder to 35 so that our ball has a fairly decent way to jump into our pool. And the number of rungs I'm going to increase because they're kind of spaced out. So let's increase those to 21. That gives a nice feeling on the spacing on the rungs. I'm also going to take our ladder width and our ladder radius and ladder offset. I'm actually going to leave those at default, and also make sure that we do have end spheres. Indeed we do. From there I'm going to make sure that our board length, board width and our pole radius for our diving board are nice values. I'm kind of happy with the length. If we take a look at the length and take a look at our radius, I'm happy with. The width maybe could do with being a little bit wider. It's kind of, I don't know,
narrow.
Yeah, so I'm thinking
Okay.
I don't know, something like 3.95 might be kind of nice, just so it kind of goes out to the edge of the spheres. We do have a problem with our ladder. If we jump into a top viewport with space 2, we can see our diving board doesn't quite reach the pool. So it kind of be a really difficult dive to jump off of here into the pool. So I'm going to jump up, and with our object level transforms, I'm going to translate in X by negative 8.365. And that will move so that we're over the pool. I'm going to switch back to a perspective view. So that's got our pool and ladder in place. Now let's deal with getting our character in place such that the character starts in his starting position for the animation, which, if you recall, the character will start positioned here and then will proceed to jump to the diving board, up the ladder, and off of the diving board. So I'm going to position him around here facing this way. So let's grab our character and bring up his visibility, and currently he's sat underneath the stage. Let's zero out our special rotate, zero out our bend, and zero out the squash and stretch so that he's back down in our default positioning. And let's take translate in Y and boost that up to 6.0335, and that will sit him perfectly on our stage. And I'm going to take translate in X and increase that over to around 14.04. So that'll just move him back to around here. So really, all that's left now is our bleachers, and then to make sure that the floor is big enough to sit underneath our bleachers and our stage setup. So let's bring in our bleachers, which we can see we've got real issues with the bleachers currently. So I'm going to switch over to the bleachers tab and deal with the geometry first. So let's hide out other objects just so we can start dealing with how many rows, how many columns, etc. So number of rows I want to increase to 8. Number of columns I want to decrease down to 5. And I want to set the inner radius to 5.51. And the height to 2.91, and the depth to 5. So already this is much larger. If we were to bring back, even though the positioning's not quite right, we can see in relation to the stage they're a decent size. I do also want to make a few changes on the audience tab, because we can see
they're teeny.
Yeah, we have a few issues with the audience, but before we do that, I'm going to jump up to object level and set our translate in X to a negative 13.1168. This number in a second is going to be important, and I'll talk about it why in a second, but we can see that that offsets things nicely for our audience to watch the performance. So let's jump back inside our bleachers asset and deal with setting up some of the audience parameters. So max balls per bench I'm going to increase up to 14. Let's increase our size so that we can see quite what's going on with these guys. So our minimum size I'm going to set to 9.5, our maximum size to 11.5, and I found a really nice size seed of 34.8. Great, so we can see what's going on with the size, but I'm not really happy with the placement in terms of the randomization on the seed. We found a nice seed off camera of 199, which for the most part is going to work nicely for us. We do have a few sparse areas, making sure to uncheck empty seats, and we're going to deal with those in the next video. And the offset seed I'm going to set to 44.3. We also have to deal with the audience lookout, and we know that the audience lookout is going to be, we want basically our audience to look at that object, but what do we have to keep in mind? Inside our bleachers asset, we make the audience look at the position that we feed in, and then after that, we've slid everything back by this negative 13.1168, which means that effectively we've taken our null and moved that in X by negative 13.1168. So that means that if we make our audience look at this null, they're really looking around here. What we need to do is take our offset parameter that we created and boost that back in the opposite direction, so in this case by positive 13.1168, and that will move back to where the null actually is. So let's jump inside our bleachers, and let's find our lookout offset and set that to a positive 13.1168. Now we do have animation parameters, but I'm going to leave these for when we actually do the audience animation, because these sort of things really we can't decide on until we have our camera in place and we can see how it looks in the camera view. But on the crowd shader, there are a few changes I want to make. I'm happy with everything on the skin color. On the shirt color, I do want to change the colors. These are a little bit too luminous. So let's, I found some more subdued colors. So 0.61, 0.19398, 0.19398. So there's our first shirt color, more of a maroon red than a bright in-your-face red. For the orange, I'm going to go with 0.697, 0.51996, and 0.34292. That's going to give us more of a sort of tan. Let's decrease the green. I'm going to go with a 0.50531, 0.625, and 0.38562. So more of a pastel green than a luminous green. With blue, I found 0.2555, 0.38325, and 0.511. So more of a grey blue than a luminous blue. And the purple was really an issue, so let's decrease that to 0.668, 0.43754, 0.668. So again, more of a pastel. And I found a nice seed for our shirt colours of 85. I'm happy with the shirt texture setup. The hair colours I'm happy with, but I do want to change their seed. Actually, the hair texture seed I want to change to 577. Everything else in terms of the shaders I was very happy with. So with that, all that's left now is our floor. So I'm going to bring our floor in. And we just need to really increase the size on our floor. So I'm going to use 150 by 140. Which is going to encompass our entire set. So I mean, you can see that there's not really much involved. Really, all I did off camera was jump in, start playing with parameters, get everything set up, and then all I've come in and done now is enter those parameters into the fields. But you can see that because we have these set up as assets, because we have all those parameters at asset level, it's very quick to come in and make those kind of changes. If we had to jump in and actually change them all down in our networks, if we didn't have those parameters, we'd have been here forever.
Absolutely. And you just said the key word. You went in there and you just played with parameter values until you were happy with what you saw. So I don't want anyone watching this video thinking, wow, you're typing in these crazy numbers like 136.83706. How would I ever come up with something like that? It's simple. Steve just used the color swatch, clicked on it, and then went around the color wheel, found a color that looked good and said, okay.
Yeah.
And then all he's done is recorded all of these values so that if anyone is following along with Steve and would like to end up with the exact same result, you can use these values. But I did notice some interesting things while you were working. While this seed looks pretty good, there's some places that are just a bit sparse, like up at the top.
Here and here.
Yeah, down at the bottom.
This bench here. And I think, yeah, here as well.
And, you know, this is very interesting. For those of you that have followed along, you may have found that digging through the seed looking for the perfect result is a bit challenging. Because where one side of the stadium might get plenty of characters, the other side might suddenly look empty. Or while the front may be full, the back of all of our rows in all of the columns may be empty. And it's just kind of challenging going through and trying to find what is the perfect seed value. So what I would like to propose is that we make a change to our bleachers such that we can have an artist go in and specify point locations to add characters to. So with that, an artist can go through, set a seed value to something that's close to what he's looking for, and then have the ability to go back in and add points into the bleachers. And now, of course, we don't want the artist to have to go into the asset network itself. So it'd be cool if our asset took an input in. So the artist could then lay out a series of points and feed that data into the bleachers network, and those points would get properly positioned for characters to be copied to. And then at that point, those points would be treated the same as all of the other points that are generated by our small distribution network. Now, that's one thing. Another thing, we all know that right now we really don't have any control over the benches themselves, as they are really just a percentage of our row length for each column, as well as the thickness being already set as well. It would be nice if we had a bit of control there, because just looking at these benches, they're very thick. The depth is really deep.
Compared to the size of the audience, we've got really
they
deep
can
benches.
they can lay down if they want to. There's plenty of room. So it would be nice to go ahead and set something up so that an artist could have control over that. And again, I'm just speaking to Steve right now as if I was an artist that had put this together, said, this looks pretty darn close to what I need. But if you could give me those, and while I'm looking at it, let me be able to control not just the depth of the benches, but the width as well. I know that you have them a percentage of the length of each row, but there's a huge gap, and maybe I don't want this much of a gap in here. So it'd be nice if I had control where I could push these guys out or pull them back in some. So thickness and width as well as being able to go in and control the placement of characters myself.
Sure.
And let me think. Anything else? I think that's pretty good. So in the next video, we will demonstrate how to go about making changes or fulfilling the request of an artist that is now using your digital asset. So that is going to wrap up this video. Thanks a lot.